Seawald, and this is Authentic Parenting, a podcast about growing ourselves while raising our children. I'm a psychologist, educator, and parent coach. And on this podcast, I explore how you can connect to your authentic self, practice radical self-care, and raise emotionally healthy children. Let's break the cycle of generational trauma for a more peaceful, kind, and compassionate world. Today, how to navigate social media safely with your kids. If you are a parent, regardless of the ages of your kids, you're probably concerned about the harms of social media on the well-being of your child. Center for Countering Digital Hate is working hard to make the multi-billion-dollar social media industry safe, transparent, and accountable to the public and users. Today, I am speaking with Imran Ahmed. He is the founder and CEO of the Center for Countering Digital Hate, US-UK. He's an authority on social and psychological malignancies on social media, such as identity-based hate, extremism, disinformation, and conspiracy theories. He regularly appears in media and in documentaries as an expert in how bad actors use digital spaces to harm others and benefit themselves, as well as how and why bad platforms allow them to do so. He advises politicians around the world on policy and legislation. Imran was inspired to start the center after seeing the rise of anti-Semitism on the left in the United Kingdom and the murder of his colleague Joe Cox MP by a white supremacist who had been radicalized in part online during the EU referendum in 2016. He holds an MA in Social and Political Sciences from the University of Cambridge, and he lives in Washington, D.C. We discuss how social media platforms and algorithms operate, the various types of harms that children experience online, and practical advice for parents and guardians. Please enjoy, and as always, thank you for listening. I learned about your organization actually from one of my guests. She cites you in her book. I'm not sure if you know about it, or her name is Cara Alaimo, and her book is called Over the Influence: Why Social Media is Toxic for Women and Girls and How We Can Take It Back.
Yeah, I do know.
Yeah, so I learned about your organization from her. It's quite an interesting mission that you have, and an important one. And I'm wondering if you could speak a little bit what got you started with this mission, with this organization. Is there an inspirational story? How did it all begin?
Well, I started CCDH about 7 years ago. I was working in Britain, British politics at the time for the Labour Party. Two things happened nearly simultaneously. One was the rise of a virulent anti-Semitism party on the left. The second was the EU referendum, where there was a lot of disinformation, but also the rise of a conspiracy theory, the first version of the Great Replacement theory. And it led to far-right terrorists assassinating my colleague, Joe Cox, who was a 35-year-old mother of two. And at that point, my heart was broken, and I realized a few fundamental things. One was that conventional institutions had failed to understand the extent to which social media was now the main place where we share information, where we establish our norms of behavior and attitude, where we negotiate our values, even negotiate what we call facts. And bad actors were using them really effectively to spread hate and disinformation. I set up CCDH to look at, well, first of all, to study how bad actors were using it. I went to the platforms, and then I realized that they didn't care. And so I set up CCDH as a public organization in September 2019 to try and bring public awareness to the problems of how online platforms, in terms of both their design, but also how they were being used by bad actors, were causing real world harm that impacts everything from identity-based hate and extremism through to our kids' mental health.
Yeah. I mean, it's funny how it became part of our life, such an integral part of our life. It's like you don't even, when you meet someone, you immediately ask for their social handles, for their, Instagram account, or instead of saying, give me your phone number, people are like, do you have an Instagram? What's your Instagram handle? It's like, it's such big part of who we are, I guess. So I want to discuss the harms of social media specifically on our children and what parents can do to protect their children, to educate themselves. You've studied several platforms, correct?
Yeah, so we look at all the major social media platforms, Facebook, the biggest still, X, Instagram, YouTube, increasingly TikTok, which is, of course, the newest one on the block, but has the most aggressive and addictive of all the algorithms. It's the crack cocaine of social media. Like, once you've taken it, you're hooked.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, parents of young teenagers, right, would definitely say that. They even say statements like this, my kid is on their device the whole day. Or people would say, I am on it constantly. It's not like we choose a specific time to use those devices. It is this ongoing stream of you're constantly connected and using it all the time.
Yeah, I mean, look, 4.8 hours a day. That's the average time that an American teenager spends on social media. 4.8 hours a day. And, a significant portion of that is spent on TikTok because it is a really effective platform at delivering short form video that will keep you addicted, that will keep you scrolling down. And that's all these platforms are. They're not about educating you or telling you what the world is saying. They're about matching up content that people produce to your psychological profile and working out what are the most likely things to keep you scrolling because they want to serve ads. And that's all they are. They're engines for advertising. And so, what TikTok is very, very good at, and every other platform is envious of, is its ability to addict children in particular.
Yeah. So, what's the future of TikTok in the United States currently?
Well, I mean, as you know, Congress has passed a bill and the president has signed it, which would force TikTok to be sold by its Chinese owners to an American company. The question is, do we think an American company would be more protective of American children? And if you look at the evidence from Instagram, owned by Meta, Mark Zuckerberg's company, or YouTube, owned by Google, both of which are American companies, well, that would give me no confidence that they would put kids first. So is this important when it comes to national security and ensuring American data doesn't go overseas? Sure. Is it going to protect our kids? Absolutely not. In fact, worse still, it might actually give false confidence to parents that this is a safer platform, when in fact it's a terribly unsafe platform. And so I think that, yes, it's great that Congress has finally gotten off its collective butts and done something. But the question for us as parents, as responsible members of society is, do we think that this industry is behaving in a responsible way towards us?
Yeah. So, what would you say? What's the most harmful platform for children? Or are they all equally damaging in their own way?
I think they're all very different. And, so Facebook is a platform that connects people into communities, some of which can be quite malignant, can be run in a malignant way by people who are spreading lies and hate. Facebook also makes it too easy to connect predators to prey. And, who preys on our kids? Some really, really dangerous and bad people. X is just rife with hate and disinformation. It starts to normalize and confuse people and make people feel that everyone is a racist and a conspiracy theorist. Instagram has particular impact on the body image and the mental health of our children. So they each have different feels to them. YouTube is basically a mechanism for mass distributing complete unchecked nonsense into our kids' brains. So, and I'm really interested in the end impact of that. We did a study last year. We polled kids and adults in both America and the UK, my home country. And we asked them a series of questions. And in those questions, we asked them a series of conspiracy questions, like, do you think there's any truth to this?
And the highest conspiracist belief of any generation is 14 to 17-year-olds. That is unprecedented. So, for example, with anti-Semitic conspiracy theories, 34% of American adults said there may be some truth to this. 43% of children and 54% of children who use social media for 4+ hours a day. And when it comes to anti-Semitic conspiracy theories, if more than half of people believe it, we're in very dangerous times. I'm European. We know in Europe what happens when those sorts of views become normalized. Terrible, terrible things. So, I am concerned about the net effect of all these different platforms, the drip of disinformation on Facebook, the reshaping of social norms on X, the accelerated distribution by algorithms of disinformation on Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube. All those things really concern me.
Yeah, and it's targeted not only, it's not only adults who are targeted, but also young children, younger and younger. Unfortunately, it's this malignancy that spreads through the fabric of the society. And it's kind of like, I don't know, it's scary for me to think. It feels like a dark hole. It's very scary when you think about it, like the future of all of this. And with AI emerging, and it's just so crazy. How do you stay hopeful? I'm not sure if positive is the right word. What motivates you to keep going and staying hopeful?
Because I do something about it, is the honest truth. One of the ways that I've found that if you are someone who's fearful and who worries about these things, doing something about it each day, putting in my effort into it every day, makes me sleep really easily at night, because I know that I'm doing all that I can. I'm a great believer in the serenity prayer. God grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, and the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. And I work really hard to change the things I can change. So I am really, really confident that actually a series of solutions that we've worked really hard on sculpting a way of creating checks and balances for social media companies that would protect First Amendment rights, but would create a healthier discourse about how these companies are run. And, that means greater transparency, more meaningful accountability, and that if they screw up and they cause real harm, that we can hold them responsible. Just like you could, like a deli. If a deli served, everyone that morning eggs that made them vomit, they would be held responsible for it. Why on earth would a social media company that addicts our children using algorithms in order to serve them advertising, if it causes them serious mental health problems as a result of the malignant design of their system, why can't we hold them responsible economically for it? At a really simple level, who can I sue? And if I can't, why?
Yeah. What are the current laws for holding tech companies accountable? Are there any laws?
Well, quite the opposite. We have a real problem. So in the US, in 1996, Congress passed an act called the Communications Decency Act. And really, the modern world and the modern digital world is a product of Section 230 of the Communications Decency Act 1996. So Section 230 was put into place before social media companies existed. And it said, look, if you run like a website, a website with fashion on it or news on it, and people put comments underneath the articles, you are not legally responsible for those comments. So it said that third-party content on your website, content produced by someone else, is not your problem. The problem is, what if you are a social media company who doesn't have any content of their own? They just aggregate other people's content. And the comments are the content. And then you even reorder all those comments to make them the most addictive first. You still cannot hold them liable for anything that's written by a third party, even if they reorder it to turn it into a form of addiction or something that might cause your kids mental health problems or might cause extremism in our society. And so what they're saying is that, what we can't do is hold them liable in any way for the harms that are created on their platform. And that's mad. I mean, can you imagine if the car industry couldn't be held liable for faulty product design, or if the airline industry, we'd have doors falling off every week, if you couldn't hold them responsible. And that's what social media companies have enjoyed for 28 years. And they did that because they said, look, this is a new industry. It's making lots of money. I'm a capitalist. I believe in prosperity. And I think that that companies should be allowed to make a buck, but not at the expense of society at a systemic level, or at the expense of our children's mental health at a systemic level. And so the situation we've got is that not only have the social media companies got no regulation, in fact, they've got anti-regulation. We cannot hold them accountable. They've got a golden get out of jail free card.
It's unbelievable, right? It's unbelievable. And, there's a lot of conversation about, children's mental health these days, and the phones and social media. And you hear all sorts of things, right? If you read Jonathan Haidt's book, social media and phones are causing mental health issues. And, and there is the other camp of people who say you can't, say there is a cause, you can only say there is a correlation. But clearly there is a problem. There is crisis of mental health. What could you say about the cause versus correlation, this debate?
Oh, I think at some point, the cause versus correlation just becomes nonsensical. And I think we're way past that point. Look, about a year ago, we did a study called Deadly by Design. We set up accounts as 13-year-old girls in 4 different countries, the US, UK, Canada, and Australia. And we recorded the first half hour of what TikTok served to those accounts. Within 2.6 minutes, it was giving them self-harm content. Within 8 minutes, eating disorder content. Every 39 seconds on average. When we renamed the accounts from Susan to Susan Lose Weight, so to show some vulnerability, those accounts got 12 times as much self-harm content. So the platform recognized vulnerability and thought, I know how to addict this child. I know what their psychological triggers are. And it gave them more content, encouraging them to kill themselves. Now, on the board of my organization is a man called Ian Russell. His daughter Molly was 14 when she took her own life. At the time, the coroner in the UK actually asked Meta and Pinterest to provide them with the images that they'd shown to her. And when they saw those images after a 3-year fight in which they tried to resist giving those images over, the conclusion of the coroner was that they presented her so frequently and without challenge, so many images of self-harm that it would have been normal. It would have been normal for her to conclude that it is normal that if you hurt inside, you hurt yourself outside. And if you really hurt inside, you kill yourself. That's the conclusion of their own investigators in a UK court. And we still can't hold them economically liable for not just Molly's death, but no doubt dozens, hundreds, possibly thousands of others. It is simply unacceptable at this point to be running an experiment on our children and saying, you've got to prove the causation. If 100 people that buy, burritos from one deli end up vomiting everywhere, maybe there's something wrong with the burritos, but it's on the deli to check. It's on our lawmakers to have laws to ensure that something is done, that they can be held liable. And we've got the opposite situation, and we're being gaslit by liars and charlatans, the companies themselves, who are telling us that, well, you haven't proven causation yet. It's your job at this point to prove that you're not causing that harm. That's how health and safety works. Risk assessment, transparency, and real accountability.
That story is just sickening. I got chills when you were telling Molly's story. Where did this, age 13 emerge? Why did social media companies selected this random number? What's known about this? What do you know about it? Why is that in the law? What law?
No law, nothing. They just keep pushing it down and down and down. They've been pushing it down for years now. And now it's down to 13, and they'll push it down to 11 and 10 and 9 and 8. And, that's just the way that these platforms operate. They're constantly trying to addict more people younger because, on average, a young user is worth more than an adult user over their lifetime because they consume more ads and buy more things. I mean, I'm 45. I've only got, I don't know how many years left of buying stuff, whereas that kid, it's got 70 years, 80 years left of buying stuff. So they're really valuable potential consumers to those companies. So they want to addict them younger and younger and younger. And there's an arms race. Now, here's the thing. This is what happens when you have no regulation. When you have no regulation, you create a competitive advantage in pushing that age down. So whichever company changes their rules to allow 11-year-olds, they will have a competitive advantage on the company that only lets 13-year-olds on. And this is why you need minimum standards. This is why we have regulation. It's to set the minimum standards so that you have a race to the top for better and better user experience, not a race to the bottom of less and less rules and less accountability.
Do you know of any industry that operates without regulations, with this kind of anarchic freedom? And are there any industries in the world that have no rules, no regulations, no laws of that kind?
Maybe the arms trade in sub-Saharan Africa, no, there aren't. Not in normal states, not in normal countries. You're talking about the lawlessness. People call it the Wild West. And I'm like, it's not the Wild West. This is like Somalia after the collapse of their government, a failed state. And it's the kind of, the reason I use Somalia is because, of course, in Somalia, when it failed as a state, suddenly terrorist groups, pedophile networks, all the dangerous people flooded there. So that's where Al-Qaeda were basing themselves and other jihadist groups. Do you want to know why? It's because they're safe there. And it's the same on our social media platforms. The reason why we see so much child sex abuse material, so much extremism, is because they feel safe there, because there are no rules. And so, the funny thing is that there are, of course, rules on all the social media platforms. Like, you sign up to them when you join them. You say that you won't be racist, you won't spread disinformation. And I'm a responsible guy in a very boring way. My wife will tell you I am Mr. Boring. And I follow the rules because I like doing that. But it's also my right, therefore, alongside my responsibility, to expect others to abide by those rules too. That's how rules work. They're equally enforced without fear or favor. And they're enforced so that actually people know that there are sanctions attached to doing them. And our platforms don't do that because they don't have to, because they can never be held liable. And so they've lied to us and told us for years there's nothing we can do, when in fact, if they started enforcing their rules, we could clean up these spaces really quickly. And these aren't free speech zones. Mark Zuckerberg's younger than I am. He's worth $100 billion. He's not in the business of free anything. He's in the minutes of getting paid for other people's speech, ironically. He doesn't actually do anything. He's a parasite who takes other people's speech, monetizes it, floods images to our children, which make them doubt whether or not they deserve to live, and then says, nothing to do with me, buddy. It's free speech.
Oh, it's just disgusting. What have you done with the information that you gathered through research and, on social media? What have you done so far, and what's in the horizons for you, for your organization?
We have 4 divisions at CCDH. We have the research division, which does the research. They're innovative and creative people who are looking at different types of harms online, whether it's kids, it's hate, it's stuff that undermines our public health. Then we have a comms division that goes out and gets this into the press so we can get it to parents, to the public, to educate people. Then we have a policy department that's going out to policymakers. And look, we've had real success with lawmakers. So in the UK, I was the first witness to give evidence for their Online Safety Act in 2021. That became law last year. In Europe, we've got the Digital Services Act. I'm going to Ottawa in a few weeks to give evidence to the Canadians for their new online safety legislation. Australia, New Zealand, South Africa, they're all passing legislation. And then we also have the partnerships division that works with everyone from, big charities to advertisers, big brands like, Disney and those people, giving them the information they need about the platforms that they advertise on. And together, what we're doing is creating checks and balances on that industry. We got sued recently by Elon Musk because he says that we cost him $100 million of advertising. Well, no, advertisers can read the research that we do. And if they decide that Elon Musk is therefore someone they don't want to do business with, that's their decision. That's what a judge dismissed all the charges because of that, because we have a First Amendment protected right to go and study these platforms, and advertisers have a First Amendment right to decide where their adverts appear. And so, we're doing all that work, but we're really pushing now for Section 230 reform. Look, every single parent in America should be going to the lawmakers and saying, what the heck are you doing about Section 230? Because if this platform hurts my kids, I need to be able to hold them liable. I need to know that there are mechanisms to hold them liable. Section 230 is killing our kids. It's destroying our democracy. It's harming all the things that made us prosperous and successful as a society. Our democracy, science, the mental health of our children, and tolerance, the tolerance that makes America the most powerful country, the beacon on the hill that everyone wants to live in, that I wanted to live in as a British person, and that I, have made my home. So I think it's vital that we take action against Section 230.
And what is the Section 230?
So of the Communications Decency Act, so that's that
the one that was accepted in 1996. Yes. Mm-hmm.
Section 230 reform is something we need as fast as possible. And I'm going to be pushing for that for the next 2, 3, 4, 5 years, making sure that we get it reformed so that we can hold these companies liable when they cause harm. And that way we create disincentives for them to continue to not act when they see harm themselves.
And is your work, had anything to do with banning phones in the UK?
No, I mean, but phones haven't been banned in the UK, but we work with the British government. We work with every government.
In schools, right? That I read some article. They haven't been banned yet? And
It's not a national ban, but yes, many schools are banning them. And we're providing the evidence that gives them the ammunition they need to make those decisions. There's also movements to voluntarily for parents to agree collectively that we're not going to give our kids phones until they're 15, 16, 17. And I think these are all really positive developments. And I'm speaking to Jonathan Haidt and his team and, many others who are trying to do really important work in this space. But, we haven't, in the end, what would be most powerful is to have that legislation in place, to have regulations in place, to have advice that the industry can know what are the minimum standards they should expect to abide by.
Yeah, I mean, you always hear advice, that it's your personal responsibility to use those devices or to guide or educate, teach your children, or as a parent to put regulations in place and things like that. And it's like, no, this is not the case, right? Like, could you speak about that personal responsibility, the balance between that and holding those tech companies accountable too, because it's not solely on us, on the poor parents, and parents can feel like a failure, like that they can't control they see that I saw just recently, let me just give this example, in my local Facebook, parenting group in my town, some mom posted anonymously, there was a question in there that my teen boy, 15-year-old, is addicted, struggling, mental health, video games, not wanting to be motivated to do school, all of those things. And the comment section, what bothered me so much, and everybody's like, no one said that it's social media causing those harms. They sort of made it seem like it's the parents' fault or there's something wrong with the kid. Take him to therapy. They suggested all sorts of things. And it's not that simple. Children, every parent knows the moment you say, stop using this, or your child gets off the phone or the device, they're a different person. They're a different kid. There are fights and arguments in people's homes. Children are volatile, explosive. Some children, they break things. Parents struggle, to put limits, to take their devices away. It's like they don't know what to do. So I want you to talk about that balance, and is there a balance? What's our responsibility? What we could do?
It's such a typical tactic by these big corporations don't want to look after the public's, the public interest, that they say, well, you have a choice. And the problem that social media companies face is that they have lied again and again about how their platforms work and how dangerous they are. In fact, even now, some of the studies that you were citing saying that there's no causal chain between online harms and mental health problems in kids are funded by those companies. So they're learning the tactics of big tobacco, funding fake studies. They're learning the tactics of big oil. Big oil's always blaming us. It says you're the ones who are burning, like, if only you separated your plastics from your other recyclables, only you switched off your thermostat and put it up to 75 and, that we'd be able to fix this. And you're like, but hold on a second, aren't you the people who are working every single day to keep us as addicted as possible to fossil fuels rather than to other alternative forms of energy? So, these are the typical tactics of big corporations, of big industries. And I think by now we should have gotten wise to them. Here's the way that I look at it. Let's imagine that there was an industry, a company in your neighborhood that was allowed to dump whatever it wanted in your local water. And you have no choice if you want to drink water, but to drink it from your locality. Now, everyone's kids start getting ill one day. And it's after they drink the water, they start feeling really, really ill. And we go to those companies and say, we need to know what you're putting in the water, and you need to stop doing it, or you're in real trouble, Buster. But they say, no. You cannot hold us liable for what we put in the water, and we will not tell you what's in there. But here's something that we paid for someone to analyze it, and it says the water's perfect. That's the situation we're in right now. We are allowing these companies to make fun of us, to abuse us, to gaslight us and lie to us, to mislead us, and there's nothing we can do about it. And until now, Congress has not had our backs either as parents. And that situation has to end. It's not about us, it's about them. It's about the companies and the lawmakers that have done nothing to stop them or to hold them accountable or to even force them to tell us what's in their product. I think that that's untenable and cannot continue for much longer. I think the movement for change and the desire for change is now, it is a cacophony. It is lots and lots of people calling for it. I look forward to ensuring that we have some sort of transparency, accountability, and responsibility in place so that we can have safer online spaces, not just for kids, but for all of them.
Yeah. What could parents do on a practical level, on a daily basis, maybe? Like, you already encouraged them to do something about Section 230, it was called.
Well, look, I encourage them to go to our website, protectingkidsonline.org, where they can see our latest PSA, and they can also download our free parents guide that explains how to have those conversations with young people. Look, there are impossible pressures on parents because their kids are coming home, and every day when they're from the age of 12, 13, they're asking, when can I have a phone? When can I have a phone? My friends have got a phone. I'm being ostracized. I can't actually be part of the, people don't want to be friends with me because I'm not online. And I think it's really important that we have a mechanism for having those difficult conversations. Now, the mechanism that we recommend, which is based on talking to psychiatrists and researchers and some of the smartest people out there, is to actually start early by having reciprocal conversations in which the kids are explaining to us what they are seeing in online spaces. And so a transparent and open exchange of information where the kids are telling us what they're seeing, and we're then helping them to contextualize it. Because actually they're going to be exposed to lies, to disinformation, to algorithmically, artificially sort of normalized ideas about eating and self-harm and, all sorts of crazy stuff. And we need to be the ones who can help them to interpret that, to explain to them that this is an algorithm, this is how it works, and this is why you shouldn't be listening to it. And so it's about creating those symmetrical exchanges of information in which the kids are telling us what they're seeing, and we're helping them to understand what it really means. And then to create barriers and boundaries from there. The worst thing that you can do is have a situation where a child is hiding it, because that's where you really can't protect them as a parent. And kids are smart. So it's about vulnerable, open, symmetrical exchanges.
Has your organization studied Snapchat?
Yeah, I mean, we've done a small amount of study into Snap, and we know that there are real issues attached with it, especially with some of the third-party apps that can be integrated into it. And those can be really, really problematic. And again, I mean, the truth is that our advice holds for any platform. It's designed to be platform agnostic. But yes, we know that Snap in particular has some real issues around some of the apps that allow it, particularly anonymization and the bullying that.
Recently, I heard something. I'm not sure if it was you who said it in an interview because, I expose myself to so many sources. I was preparing for this interview, but Snapchat has introduced like your own AI button, right? Each user has their own sort of buddy that you can talk to. I asked my 16-year-old daughter and she says, I'm not dumb to use that. Like, she understands what that is. I'm not sure where I heard this, that some young child, or was this an experiment? They started talking to that AI and saying, hey, I'm a 13-year-old girl, and I just met this. Is this familiar to you? I met this older boy, and he wants to go out with me. And the AI response to this girl is, oh, that's so lovely. And she says, oh, I want to make it special. He wants to take me out of our first date. And the AI says, that's amazing, keep going. And then it starts giving advice how to behave during the first night, during the first day, how to engage with this boyfriend or whatever. And it's like, wow, this is not okay. This is not cool. Like, while my 16-year-old can discern that I'm not like a loser to talk to this AI, well, some other vulnerable 11-year-old, 12-year-old, a younger kid may not discern. If they are lonely, they are chatting with their buddy. So what could you say about that?
I mean, again, AI is unregulated, and we are desperately trying to get that in place right now. Artificial intelligence is badly named. I mean, they call it artificial intelligence, but really it's basically just giving you what it thinks you want to hear based on what it's read from the internet. Can you imagine if if your doctor came to you and was like, so I've never been to medical school, but I went on the internet. I went on Twitter, in fact, and I think I know how to do the surgery. Going to be real easy. I'm just going to cut your right leg off. And you're like, but I have a sore throat. And they're like, yeah, don't worry about it. I went on Twitter. And that's what artificial intelligence is. It's not artificial intelligence. It's a real dumbass. And so why are we surprised that if you put garbage into these models that you don't get garbage out? But we call it artificial intelligence. And I think that's half the problem, is that it's made by clever people. It's called intelligence. And so therefore we should listen to it. They're currently testing it on us. The reason why they've released these things is to get more real life test data. And so using that as a way to make decisions or to find out information, it's a really dangerous and dumb thing to do. And one of the problems is that, of course, AI is now being secretly integrated into a lot of different products. And so I find that quite frustrating because, I mean, it's funny. I went, it reminds me of like one of those kids that goes to those private schools that thinks they know everything because they went to a private school and they come out and they just tell you about. I remember this British kid telling my wife, who's American, about how American politics is different to British politics. And he was trying to explain to her how American politics work. And I was like, my wife has 3 degrees and one of them is in politics. Calm down, son. And that's what artificial intelligence is.
Imran, what fires you up? What's keeping you going every day? I want to know that. And what is your final message to conclude our conversation?
It's been the same for me. What fires me up every day is bullying and unfairness. And I think that these companies are bullying our society, right? They're bullying our kids. They're forcing their products down their throats, not telling them what they're giving them, and then telling us if we complain, free speech, and you should do something. You're the parent. And I just find that fundamentally unjust, unfair, and arrogant and bullying. And so, but what fires me up is taking on those bullies. It was always something I was good at when I was young. I never feared anyone, never feared any bully. I didn't fear Elon Musk when he sued us, and we beat him. So I think that we've proven that we can do that, and I feel a very quiet satisfaction when I finish my day that I haven't done something to push the arc of history towards justice. And, the final thing I'll say is just go to our website, protectingkidsonline.org, download the free stuff. We're never going to charge people. We are there to help. We're there to educate. We're there to give you the tools that you need to be able to make a difference as well. And so thank you so much for listening, and thank you for giving me the chance to speak to your amazing audience.
Thank you for being here today. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure.
That concludes today's conversation, my dear listener, and I hope you enjoyed it and found it helpful and not alarming. I am curious, what are your takeaways? Please get in touch. I always love hearing from you. Your feedback, comments, and questions are important. You can send me a note to the email info@authenticparenting.com. You can call the number 732-763-2576 and leave a voicemail. For international listeners, there is a free tool on the contact page of my website called SpeakPipe. Head over to authenticparenting.com/contact and send me a message. If you love the podcast, please take a moment to rate it or write a review on Apple Podcasts. We rely on listeners' support for production, hosting, and post-production of the podcast. Your donations are extremely vital. To learn more and make a contribution, go to authenticparenting.com/support. Thank you for your kind and generous support. It means the world to me. And as always, connect to the present moment, to yourself and your children. Until next week, I am Anna Seewald. Thank you so much for listening.